Hello and welcome to PGurus channel. I'm your host Sri Iyer. Today I stumbled upon a tweet by Professor Subhash Kak that kind of got me thinking. See, my native language is Tamil. I was born in Chennai, but I never really formally learned the language. I just learned it by reading the periodicals, and I used to like the cartoons. I wanted to understand what it was. So I would go in and I taught myself the language. However, in the last 50 years, during the time of Karunanidhi in the earlier regimes as well as MGR, they have been progressively reducing the letters that were used to represent the Tamil language, and this was done in the pretext that it makes the typesetting simpler. Now, some of those things were too egregious or too way out there for people to use it, because the printing presses were already there. They were not willing to change. Some got in, some didn't get in. Essentially, what you have as the Tamil language today is a mess. It boasts that it is like Tamil, it's like English in that it has few letters. However, the tweet that Subhash Kak today put out opened my eyes to what Tamil used to be before this Dravida movement came in and wreaked mayhem on the language. That's the only way I can put it. So to know a little bit more about it, let's go join Professor Subhash Kak. Subhash Kak ji, welcome to PGurus channel.
Thank you, Sri Iyer ji. Delighted to be a part of this conversation.
See, so this is my mother tongue, so I have I'm very emotionally attached to it. And the first time when I saw that there were representations for all the different, hard, soft vowels or soft expressions, it really opened up my eyes. For instance, for the viewers who don't understand or who don't know Tamil, I'll give you a simple example as to how complicated it is. See, if you have ka, kha, ga, gha, all these four are represented by a single letter. So how much hardness you put into it is dependent on the context, on what the rest of the sentence is. So Tamil has become a really complicated language. Plus, it is very difficult to express, say, for example, Sanskrit in the modern day Tamil script. It is because you don't know which one it is. When you say ka, ka, kha, ga, ga, all of them are together. Same thing with ta, tha, da, da. Everything is only single letter. So this becomes a really messy situation. Somehow, in the name of Tamil pride, Dravidian pride, people have really messed with this language. So this revelation, I just wanted to reach out to Professor Kak and wanted to find out from him where he got on this and what is this Tamil that he has published in his tweet, which we will put out in this video so the viewers can see for themselves what are the different letters that existed in Tamil language. Professor Kak, the floor is yours.
Okay, there are many different aspects to this whole question of Indian scripts. First of all the Indian scripts, including Tamil, were used to write Sanskrit. The exclusive relationship between Sanskrit and Devanagari script is only 100 or 150 years old, and it was pushed or promoted for the sake of simplicity. When the Europeans or the English came in, they said, well, it'll be simpler to just use one script. And since they were based primarily in North India, so they picked Devanagari script. And the consequences of this, of course, are enormous, because the young person who grows up now thinks that Sanskrit and Devanagari are a unique combination, and that somehow Sanskrit is alien to the other scripts that are used in India. But if you go back to texts, say 100 years old or older, you'll see that Sanskrit is written in Assamese, in Bengali, in Odia, in Telugu, in Kannada, in Malayalam, in Tamil, and Gujarati. Every script that you have in India, Sanskrit was written down. And not only India, Sanskrit was also written down in the Javanese script in Indonesia, in the Balinese script. And this script, all these scripts that you have in India, Southeast Asia, ancient Philippines, are all derived from a single script, Indian script, which is called Brahmi script. And there is also strong evidence, and I have myself researched on it and published papers in peer-reviewed journals, arguing, and I can explain what the logic is, arguing that the Brahmi script derives from the 5,000-year-old or 4,500-year-old Indus script, which is also called the Saraswati script. And in fact, one can see the name Saraswati is very logical because Brahmi also represents Saraswati. So it's a single script, the origins of all the Indian scripts and Southeast Asian scripts. And not only that, the script which is even currently used in Buddhist temples in Japan called the Siddham script is also from India. In fact, the Siddham script is somewhat related to, or in fact quite related to Devanagari plus the Sharada script of Kashmir. So that the Brahmi and its daughter scripts were spread all over the most populated part of the ancient world, because Asia is where the most of the population was. And Sanskrit was not alien to any part, because look at the great empire of the Cholas, and they spread, what language did they spread? Because this was the vehicle of communicating some of the finest aspects of, say, archaeology, architecture, music, and so on. So what they took, for example, to Indonesia was also Sanskrit. And of course, the other languages were also used. So this is one aspect. The other aspect which truly astonishes me, that after 1947, and you did touch upon it, for the sake of simplicity, and this was done in Devanagari also, that Na and Anuswar were all converted into a single dot. And now there's no need. Now, at that time in 1947 or 1950, when you had those old clunky mechanical typewriters, you wanted to simplify things. And because in the 150 years of the British rule, the literacy in India dropped from 60 or 70% to just 3 or 4%. And that's a separate story, which I'll be very happy to amplify on at some later time. So now, but look at what the Europeans are doing, what the English are doing. The English are using more letters, more than 26 letters. They use dots at different places, which can all be expressed using computers, so that you can even write Sanskrit in the English script in a exactly one-to-one mapping. So it's rather odd that Tamil, which had all the additional characters, has dropped all those, so that, as you correctly pointed out, it becomes very confusing to represent all the letters of each row in the Varnamala, in the, let's call it, pan-Indic Varnamala. And in fact, right now, it's very amusing. One can sometimes recognize who is from Tamil Nadu, because there they mix up K and G.
Yes.
Instead of Nilakantha, you'll say Nilakanda. So you can very easily, very quickly, and these could even be priests at a temple, you can guess as to who is from Tamil Nadu and who is not.
Yes. So, so the modern day Tamil Tamil speaker cannot actually pronounce the Ra sound, which is unique to, in my opinion, only two languages today, Malayalam and Tamil. These are the only languages that use the Ra word. But the modern day Tamil guy, who's all for Tamil pride and all that stuff, cannot pronounce this. So I don't know what kind of pride they are trying to say, except that these are all minds who have been totally poisoned with some nonsense, which needs to be opened up. I'm really hoping, Professor Subhash Kak, I'm going to send this thing to Google and see if I can encourage them to add another language to their already growing list of languages and say, this is Tamil Grantha, and then allow the user to pick which version of Tamil he wants to when he starts writing.
Oh, absolutely. Let's look at it. First of all, the script that you're talking about, you're saying that Google should also have the Tamil Grantha script.
Yes.
And it's not a problem from a computer computational point of view, a processing point of view. And I think that'll be a very small issue if they already do not have it, because I believe there is a coding for Tamil Grantha as well. Now, the other point which is very interesting is that we live in an age where technology has made it possible for us to provide as much of information to every user, so that if I can read Persian, or I can, if I knew Chinese, I can see the Chinese characters also, and of course Sanskrit and Devanagari and Telugu and so on. So I think, for the sake of, even let's forget about the whole question of the politics of what made about 100 years ago some politicians in Tamil Nadu to drop these letters, which were a part of the Tamil Grantham script. But we are living in an age where we want to be inclusive. Let's embrace everybody. And those who don't want to use these additional characters, let them not use it. I think by doing so, we would be opening up much more to every user. I think we should approach all these questions from the perspective of love and inclusion. Let's include everybody. So and Sanskrit is nothing. Sanskrit is a language which was a vehicle to communicate and transmit some of the most fabulous ideas that have arisen anywhere in the world. They are not a part of any specific individual or any part of India, because the scholars and individuals and users who use Sanskrit were from each part of India. And therefore, to deny oneself the beauty of the script and the language, and the script meaning, I'm not talking about whether it's got to be written in Devanagari, not at all. It should be written in any script, as it has been for thousands of years. So why don't we be inclusive? Why don't we approach the question of language and knowledge from the perspective of love? And we are not even talking about being exclusively connected only to India. Let's approach all knowledge from all parts of the world in an inclusive manner, from a perspective of love. I think that will only be a good thing.
Absolutely, couldn't agree with you more, Professor Kak. I was fortunate enough to grow up in Andhra Pradesh, and the Telugu that is spoken even today has a liberal, 70 to 80% is Sanskrit. And therefore, and there was this period of mythological films or itihasic films that N.T. Ramarao used to act as. Either it was a Krishna Bhagavan or some key figure, and those had so much of our history captured, and our generation was extremely lucky to have grown in that period. And I'm really hoping, like you said, out of love for languages, and it is the importance of Sanskrit, that what it conveys, the richness of the language, that needs to be captured in the language that you can read and write. Subhashji, so the Brahmi script goes back to what age? And before that, how was Sanskrit represented? Because if my memory is correct, the Shruti, that is Rig Vedas, go back, I think, 6,000, 8,000 years back. I'm not even sure about the date. So maybe if you can walk our viewers through how Sanskrit has been propagated before the Brahmi script came along.
Well, there are references to letters or texts being in a box in the Atharva Veda. Atharva Veda, in the most conservative chronology, is certainly about 1000 BC. Now, the Rig Veda has within it astronomical references which go to about 3000 BC. Now, there is also the tradition within India that the Mahabharata war took place in 3137 BC. And that's when, and 35 years after that, 3102 BC is when Kali Yuga began. So this is an old.
Correct. So Mahaprasthanam is defined as the point at which point, the Kali Yuga begins, or either that or Krishna's leaving the abode, leaving Earth.
Right. That is in tradition taken to be 3102 BC. But that's a complicated issue because there are other traditions, for example, in Varaha Mihir and in Kalhan's Raj Tarangani, which suggests that the Mahabharata war took place 500 years later. So this is a question where there is no total agreement, and there is also references in the Puranas which suggest that the war may have taken place a bit later. So, but without going into those issues, which we could discuss at some other point, and that's a very, very fascinating story in itself. it is quite clear that Sanskrit is extremely ancient. The Vedas are extremely ancient, 4, 5, 6,000 years old, if not older, because, you know, languages do not have a sudden beginning. This is a vehicle to carry some of the most astonishing and extraordinary wisdom that we have anywhere in the world. But it is true that, first of all, the Harappan civilization, which is also called the Indus civilization, and now because the oldest location of that has been found in Haryana at a place called Bhairana. So now there are grounds to call it the Saraswati tradition because the Saraswati river flowed through Haryana and down to the sea. So the Saraswati script, if we may call it that now, was very developed, and we see it going back to about 3000 BC. And we see it continue to be used very widely all over India up to in the mid second millennium BC. And then we see Brahmi about 400 BC or so. So there is a gap. Now, that gap may be because we haven't looked at all the ancient archaeological sites. And a few years ago, they discovered Brahmi inscriptions in Sri Lanka, which are much older than Ashoka, 500-600 BC. And then there are two interesting questions here. First of all, the research that I did about 20-30 years ago on the Indus Saraswati script, what I did was I looked at the 10 most commonly occurring symbols of the script, which you can do because we have records and we see which one occurs the most commonly. And then I looked at the 10 most commonly occurring letters of Brahmi, which you know the frequencies of Sanskrit letters, so we know which are the 10 most frequently occurring symbols. And we found almost a 1-to-1 correspondence in the rank order of the Saraswati letters and the Brahmi letters. So what I argued was that if there were people who came from outside, because that is one of the theories which the Europeans, that invasion theory, then why would they have picked letters in the same rank order to create another script, which is the probability of that is almost zero. So I argued on those and many other grounds, and people can see my articles in a journal called Cryptologia. On these grounds, I argued that structurally Brahmi is derived from the older Saraswati script. And therefore, here we are talking of a script which was found in all corners of India, including Tamil Nadu. So some of the most ancient inscriptions in Brahmi are to be found in Tamil Nadu. And it's also been called the Tamil Brahmi script. And a scholar who passed away last year, Airavatham Mahadevan, did a lot of work on the Tamil Brahmi inscriptions. So this belongs to all of us, all of India and overseas. And we should really be celebrating it from a perspective of inclusiveness, as I mentioned, and from a perspective of providing as much of knowledge to people as is possible, just as the Europeans are expanding their alphabet list. You know, as I mentioned, you can now write Sanskrit perfectly in English script as well.
You know, speaking to you, sir, you are a modern day rishi because, you know, your knowledge is growing, and I'm sure our viewers are thrilled to listen to you, and we would like to come back to you with more such illuminating discussions. And thank you very much for taking time out from your busy schedule to be with us. Thank you once again, Professor Kak.
Thank you. Namaskar.
Namaskar.